Welcome to Three Righteous Mamas, a podcast that is on a mission to transform our country. We tell the stories that matter, celebrate the power and hope of pissed off mamas who are building a better future for all of our children. Hi, I'm Cristina Sensun Ramirez.
Hi, I'm Muna Husseini.
Hi, I'm Martha Pincoffs.
Welcome, y'all. So we've got a great show for you today. We've got Jyarland Daniels with us that's going to talk about how we heal, how we apologize, how we build that country we want for all our kids, especially in this really tough time and divided time we find ourselves in this country. But before we get there, I want to know how you two are holding up. Right now, we're seeing the numbers absolutely skyrocket, which is just so hard to see and sad, of the number of COVID cases, well over 100,000 new cases a day. And I'm wondering how you and your kids are holding up and what you're doing to try and keep them safe, but also having fun as much as you can.
You know, it really is stunning to me. I was talking to a friend who's a nurse today, and we were talking about how New Mexico has gone on lockdown to preserve health of their community and to make sure that they have the hospital beds that they need to treat the cases that they have in that state. And she was saying that we should all be on lockdown. The whole country should be on lockdown based on what the numbers are doing. And it's again, like we've had this conversation before about other things, but it feels like there is this numbness to the bigness of the suffering. And like I when the pandemic started, I remember like I couldn't stop thinking about the family members alone in the hospital, not being able to be held by their loved ones.
Or even seen by them.
Or even seen by their loved ones, but to not be held by their loved ones at the end of their lives. And that's now happened to over 245,000 individuals in this country. And I don't know.
So I didn't tell y'all this, but it just came up for me that I actually I lost a very close family friend this weekend. It's the first personal person I know that passed away from COVID. And she was isolating at home and she had very limited contact. We're still not sure how she got it. And I'm not sure even what all the details are. But I was so upset, not just that she passed away, but exactly what you said, where I don't know who she was with when she passed away. I don't know where her family was. We have certain burial rituals in our community that we can't follow. This is a childhood friend of both of my parents. When my father lost his job, we stayed with them. You know, when my dad lost his job, this was his best friend, you know, their family that was like, hey, what do you need? Whatever money, right? Like very, very close family friends. And my parents are probably not even going to go to her burial because like, okay, you're going to go there, you're going to pray and you're going to leave because you can't even gather with people. And it's horrible that we've lost her, but then we can't even be supportive.
Right.
And I feel so robbed. I mean, you never know what your time is, but did it have to be like this? And I have so much anger and resentment. And it makes me think of all the people that are like, oh, it's just the flu. You know, well, old people die anyways. Well, hey, like, not my old people. I guess if you want to feel that way, maybe you're old people, but like, I love all of my people and I don't want any of my people going anywhere if I can help it. And so I still haven't processed everything, but I just wish we could all be in a place to pour in and want more for each other than to just be like, boohoo, sucks to be you. And America, my freedom is more important than like your family members being okay. And I just don't know how we got here, but that's neither here nor there.
I know. I'm really sorry, Muna. I'm really sorry.
Me too.
And to know that there's like a web across this country of all of that suffering. And before you actually joined the call, Muna, Martha, and I were talking about the, just one news clip that came out the last few days of a young 4-year-old boy in San Antonio that his dad died a month ago of COVID. His dad was 29. And then a month later, his mom died of COVID-19, and she got sick within hours. She was dead. And so that child is an orphan. And, our world is carrying on, much of it like there's not a pandemic and people are being forced to make impossible choices. And then wearing or not wearing a mask is like a badge of honor versus just like, here's the most basic way to care for the people around me and myself.
Right.
And, we're all isolated and separated. So I don't think we can even see the level of human suffering that's out there. And I'm really, really sorry for your loss, Muna. And, I wonder how this will be remembered by our kids, like Santi, like he knows when we go places, if we talk about the coronavirus, that it's dangerous. And we got to put our masks on, but he doesn't really, of course he's a child, he doesn't understand it. So I know your kids are older, Muna. So do they know about this loss in your all's family?
My parents just told me about it yesterday morning, and I think that I was so thrown that I actually didn't talk to either of my kids about it. I need to do that, but I think I need to be in a place where I can actually articulate something that makes sense. Here's my hope. I want us to figure out a way to honor science and honor the challenges that people have right now. We are missing our social structure that allows people to provide for their families and feed their families and get healthcare and still shelter in place to deal with this pandemic. And I really want us to be able to solve for that with compassion, grace, and care in a practical way that so many other countries have been able to do. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to be in a place of like holding blame or resentment for others. It is more important than ever that we can figure out effective and constructive ways to deal with our conflict, because otherwise I don't see how we find a way forward. It's not my mother that passed away, and I'm this upset. So I don't know how other people are able to like put their feet forward when they're holding more pain and more hurt or more anger. And so I can't sit here and gracefully say like, yep, you should do it, because I can't tell anyone to move through that, right? Mm-hmm. But I would ask that we find that compassion for each other to find that way forward. Because 225 deaths is no small number. And that doesn't include all the other things that are being exacerbated right now, right? And Martha, going back to your question, yes, what I'm talking about and the loss in our, I guess, extended family, I also think about, you know, the other losses that we're all dealing with and struggling with, in the sense that, like, you know, my daughter's in middle school and she doesn't have any friends. And for the last 7 months, she's been sitting in front of a computer. Right. And I think about Santi, right? Like, who probably was like outside and playing, and like his world probably got hit hard too, because now he's like stuck inside, and it's not even, I mean, how much, I don't know, Disney Plus can you watch, right? Like, there's so many micro losses, or, you know, the folks that are like, I can't run my business if people are stuck at home. And it's just all stacked.
I will say that I think it is the optimist in me that, look, there's so much pain, there's so much exposure of so many failures of our government to care for us as a people, right? In the way that we should. Like, no country, let's remind ourselves, no country has as many deaths as we do. Nobody.
That's right.
And so, you know, it's an exposure of so many different pains, failures, and it shouldn't take this much pain to expose those things, but it also is a demand for change. It's a demand to say, why can't we be a country that succeeds by caring for one another? Why can't we be a country? Why do we have to be the only industrialized country on the planet that doesn't have healthcare for everyone? Why do we have to be a country that's the richest nation in the world, and where Jeff Bezos got to make billions of dollars during the pandemic, while tens of millions of people lost their jobs and fell into absolute economic collapse? That is not a strong or healthy country. And so, out of all of that pain, maybe it's an opportunity to build something completely new. And I hope it does become that, because for me and for our little people, it should be an absolute call to action to make change. And I know we're all working to do that already. But that is what my call, when I hear about your story, Muna, or I read about the little boy's name was Raiden in San Antonio, and I hear his story, I think about what he's going to grow up with and how we make that legacy, or try to make that legacy, different.
Our kids are watching.
I feel like talking to Jyarland about compassion, talking to Jyarland about forgiveness, talking to Jyarland about how to have hard conversations, is just part of the piece of the puzzle that we need to be able to tackle this stuff. And Muna, thank you for sharing your story.
We love you.
Big time.
Mm-hmm.
That was hard, but apparently I can't do it right.
I felt it.
I don't know, some kind of weird figure eight.
I knew what you were doing there.
I love y'all too. I'm glad we'll be talking to Jyarland today. Three Righteous Mamas is a podcast that is on a mission to transform our country. We tell the stories that matter, celebrate the power and hope of pissed off mamas who are building a better future for all of our children. I'm so excited to introduce our special guest today. Jyarland Daniels is a global diversity, equity, and inclusion communications leader who is supporting schools, nonprofits, and organizations in their efforts to shape culture, improve communication, and develop policies and practices that result in a more inclusive organization. She has an illustrious background in marketing and public relations for large companies like Hallmark, Johnson Johnson, the Ford Motor Company, and Volkswagen, but I'll call them Bentley Motors. And Jyarland is the founder of Harriet Speaks, which is a DEI consultancy that integrates all of her expertise to support nonprofits, schools, and corporations. She has several degrees, an undergrad from Kansas State, She has an MBA from the Ross School at University of Michigan, where she was a Consortium for Graduate Studies and Management Fellow. And she has a Juris Doctor in Civil Rights and Education Law from Wayne State in Detroit, Michigan. She is a proud member of Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority. And I recently know that Jyarland is thinking about starting a civil rights practice, along with her diversity and inclusion consultancy, and which I'm super excited about. So thank you for joining us, Jyarland. Can you just tell our listeners who will be following along, is there a social media handle that you prefer them follow you on in the internets?
That is such a good question. I probably don't use the internet webs as much as I should, or as well as I should, but they can find me on Facebook at Jyarland, which is my first name, spelled Jyarland, or they can find Harriet Speaks has a Facebook page as well.
Awesome, thank you. So to kick us off, is there a mother figure who helped shape the fighter and champion you are today and all of the work you do? Can you tell us about this person?
That's a really great question. I think there are many. And the reason that I say that is because my own story is that I grew up in foster homes. And so I was in foster care from age 1 through 18. And I lived in 10 different foster homes during that time. And what I will say, what my older self says, is each one of the mothers in those foster homes, even the ones that weren't ideal, they all shaped me in some way. And I think that that's probably something important for us as parents to keep in mind, is that, you know, even when we are not perfect, even when our situation or circumstances are less than ideal, we can still shape a child in a way that is positive. And so I think about, you know, my first foster mom, who was someone who was, grew up and she was born, let me just say this, just to give you context, she was born in 1908 in Alabama. And so if we understand the history of race in this country, she was very old when I lived with her. But then there were other foster moms who were younger, but who were more educated. There were white foster moms who exposed me to some different ways of thinking and other things. There is one who I am very close with today. But in terms of mamas, there are also all of these women educators who played such an important role in my life. And while they weren't my mama, they were a mom, right? And they brought that and they poured that into me as well. And so that's a really great question. And I wish I could say just one person, but I can't. And I think that's probably what makes me unique, is that I had all of these different experiences and I've learned to channel and think about what ordinarily might be considered dysfunction into something that makes me just different.
Jyarland, you know, I wonder, you know, you have done so much in communicating and bringing people together to communicate across race and class. And I guess, like, you've had so many different mother figures as you've done in your life. Did that teach you how to do this kind of work? You know, because it's both, so many folks that grow up in foster care, it's about survival and learning how to communicate through all kinds of conflicts and situations. Did that help shape you to do this kind of line of work?
I think it did. For sure, no questions asked. I think that it's so important for us to not separate our life experiences from who we are and the things that help to shape us. And so you're right, Christina. I am sure that learning how to identify and connect with people at an emotional level has helped me, and that's something that I learned in foster care. But I think too, being a mom is what really changed things for me. So yes, I had all of these mother figures, but when I became a mom, much like what the role is that you all see for Three Righteous Mamas, this notion of making the world a better place for your child. I think when you become a parent, you do begin to think outside of yourself for the very first time. And for me, I don't think I put all of the parts of who I am together in being a diversity and inclusion consultant and professional until I became a parent and I saw my child experiencing issues related to racial inequity in school. And when I saw that, and when I felt powerless to do anything about it, that is when I said, later for this, I'm going to law school because this is not okay. I'm quitting my job at Bentley. I'm going to law school. I'm going to study civil rights and education law because someone has to change it. And so that, I think we can't underestimate the role that being a parent, how that changes us.
Yeah. I totally agree with that. And it's, I mean, that's a huge leap to leave Bentley. And I would imagine like that's a really different lifestyle than re-entering school and going to do that. So there's a lot of fire in that decision. So when you were talking about your teachers, this is a conversation that we have a lot in the queer community, and I'm an adoptive parent. So blood has nothing to do with family for me. And I wonder if that's an intersection that we share. Because I have found so much beauty in chosen family and in people that have shown up and lifted. So that's what the teacher Renata sounds like, a chosen family member.
That's so true, Martha. And what I would say about that is, I think sometimes we ask people, oh, how many siblings do you have? And it's seemingly a really normal question, and you're just trying to bridge and you're just trying to have a conversation. But for those of us who have chosen families, that question gives me like stress. I'm just like, yes. I don't know. Don't make me do that. I don't know what you're saying to me. And so I think that it would be wonderful if we found, in terms of our own language, if we're really talking about being inclusive, and if we're really talking about recognizing that there are different types of families and different types of relationships, it would be wonderful if we found a way to ask that question and try to build that bridge without saying and suggesting that it's so narrow and it's so limiting.
Right, because their beauty and I'm not trying to dismiss born family, but but chosen family really is a spectacular thing to get to experience.
It really is. And I will tell you, because I do have biological siblings, and I don't know them very well. But what I will say is the siblings who I chose are the people who I am here for and they're here for me. a perfect example of that is actually before this podcast, I picked up the phone and I called my niece who just turned 13. Well, she's not my biological niece.
Right.
Her mom was one of my foster sisters, and she and I, you would like have to fight us if you tried to tell us that we weren't really sisters. And it's just like annoying to me, like, okay, why do I have to like go through this conversation of explaining that she's not really my sister, but she is my sister because I said she's my sister. Yeah. But she's my sister. So I think that's beautiful. And I think that can be a way of helping us to see the humanity in one another, this notion of chosen families and making just even that term of family much more broad.
I'm loving the way that you approach things with, I don't know if I would say fluidity, but it's intentionality of what is this word? What is this relationship? What does it mean for me? And I will confess to have called a mutual friend and have done some homework. And I wanted to ask you, Shadia said that there was a perhaps funny story about a time in your life, I guess when you realized that you were Black.
This is hilarious. I'm going to let you continue so I know how far to go into this conversation.
We keep it real here.
So I am originally, I'm from Kansas. I'm from rural Kansas. And, you know, I'm not sure which part of the story that Shadia was thinking about, but I will tell you that no one likes 80s rock more than me. And so Shadia is making fun of me because I love Bon Jovi and Def Leppard.
Yes.
And Poison and all of those people. And so one of the jokes that Shadia and I have is that there is a book inside of me. And one of the titles that we've talked about is I Was White in the 80s. And that's where she's laughing at me about. But I will tell you that it's funny in the sense that, so I grew up in this rural Kansas community, and it was situated next to a military base. And so while we might think of Kansas as being just white, the community that I grew up in was a little bit different because there was this influence of the military base. And so it was very, very diverse. But I didn't grow up thinking about color, but now that I look back on it, it was reinforced for me in ways that I didn't even understand, actually nefarious ways that I did not understand at the time. One of the reasons that I left Bentley is because I had an epiphany. And that epiphany was, wait a minute, regardless of my education, regardless of how much money I make in this system, you cannot like out earn or out educate your way out of race. It does not happen. And so I came to that realization, and then also seeing what my son was experiencing. So there are lots of parts to this story. And I'm happy to talk about it some more.
Would you feel comfortable telling us about one of these instances, maybe regarding your son, where you had this realization, like maybe one of the instances where you thought, okay, I'm done with this corporate career. I am turning a corner. I am going into civil rights work. Like, I guess, what was the camel that broke the straw's back? I said that wrong. What was the camel's back for you?
I know what you meant. So a couple of things. I think it's important to give voice to this idea that the things that happen in our lives, we don't often connect the dots right then. Something else has to happen in order for you to connect the dot to that thing that happened like episodes ago, right? So one of the things that I will tell you is when I was in 7th grade, I moved from the city that I grew up in, Junction City, to Topeka, Kansas. And I had another foster family because the woman who I had lived with from the time I was 1, she died. And so I had this new foster family. And to make a really long story short, if you know anything about civil rights history, Topeka, Kansas was the site of one of the landmark lawsuits in civil rights law, and that is Brown versus Board of Education. And this is the lawsuit that led to the desegregation of schools in this country. Well, the little girl in that lawsuit, Linda Brown, was my piano teacher.
What?
For real, for real. And I know, Martha, you're like,
that is amazing.
Hey, why didn't you tell us that at the beginning? We could have been here like 20 minutes ago. So what happened was this. So this family, and I knew them because they were connected to my first family. They moved me to Topeka. They wanted to keep me, you know, with people who I knew. And I loved piano. And so the father was a pastor at a church in Topeka. And so he says, okay, well, this is our church pianist and she's going to give you piano lessons. And I'm like, okay, yeah, great. And that church pianist at St. Mark's AME was Linda Brown. And I will never forget going to piano lessons one day. And I came home and my foster father at the time says, well, you know who she is, right? And I was like, well, she's Miss Brown. And he was like, no, you need to know about this lawsuit. Listen, I think that's when I stopped playing piano, for real. Because I had no more interest in playing the piano. I just wanted to talk to her. Like, I could not wait to get to piano lessons because I wanted to talk to her about this experience. And so that's all I did. I would literally play a little bit and I would like find ways to talk to her about, so what was that like? So how does it feel to be a part of this lawsuit? And lo and behold, I remained close to her. So fast forward a few years, my son is now he was in 2nd grade. I'm working at Bentley. I finished my MBA at Michigan. There was another instance that I will tell you about. Again, I came to pick up my son. Actually, I was called while I was at work that he was in the principal's office and I needed to come. I came and what I was told was, your son has threatened a teacher. A teacher is afraid of him. Again, he's in 2nd grade. And I'm like, are you serious? Are you kidding? And so I had learned by this time to ask my child what happened. And that I think is just so important for all parents to do. I grew up in a time where if the teacher or the adult said something, it was gospel and you just absolutely believed it. But I kind of, decided that wasn't ideal. So I asked my son what happened. And he said, Mom, I took one of those sticks because I was told that he had threatened a teacher with a stick. And he says, I picked up that thing from the ground. And I said, well, what do you mean? And he said, and he's in 2nd grade and he's trying his best to explain to me what happened. He said, the thing that you blow. What happened was he had picked up a dandelion stem. He had picked up a dandelion stem and had hit the dandelion stem on a table, on like a picnic table on the playground. And that is what the teacher said caused her to feel threatened and unsafe. So the next day I went to school and I said, was it a dandelion stem? And they said, yes, it was. And so I quickly realized that my son was this is what we call the school to prison pipeline, right? Yeah. For real. And what I did, I called Linda Brown. I called Linda Brown in tears. I don't know what possessed me to do that at that moment, but I hadn't spoken to her for years at this time, but I called her in tears. And what I said to her, and I'm going to try to tell you this without crying, what I said to her was, but I thought this was okay. I thought it was handled. I thought we were done with this. What is happening here? And you should know the school district that we lived in, was it's very wealthy, a very affluent suburb of Detroit. And so I called Linda Brown and I said, I thought we were done. I thought your parents, we had this lawsuit. And what she said to me is, yes, we did. And what she said was, the work continues. And when she said that the work continues, that was all I needed to hear. And things literally, within a matter of a couple of months, went into motion, and where I separated from my job and went to law school full time. So that's a little bit of the story. And I didn't connect those dots, you know, of having met and literally sitting at the feet of Linda Brown as a child, to that thread continuing throughout my life, and then it being a way for me to try to save my own child.
And Jyarland, you know, you've had so many times, you know, speaking of what Linda Brown said, that the work continues, right? And you've had so many times when you had to stand up for your son, stand up for what you believe in, something that was hard, but from a place of conviction. And now you're in this area of work where you ask people to stand up for their values, for their beliefs about inclusion, about equity, about where we all get to be seen and accepted for who we are. And now we're at this, you know, with the work continues. I don't think Linda Brown could have thought when your son was a child that we would be at this place today where we would have a president like that we do right now, where that would be trying to take us backwards. And so how do we have these, how do we work towards that world for our children, and also have the power of forgiveness in the moment like this, so that we can, because the hardest thing is, right, we want to build a world for all of our children, but it also feels like some people don't want that world for our children. So how do we reconcile that?
Christina, that's such a powerful, I think, and profound question. So the first thing I think is, and, you know, Linda Brown has, you know, she died, and so I can't speak for her. But what I think she would say, and what I think many people who have fought battles in this country related to civil rights would say, is it is a pendulum. So I don't know that she would be just in complete shock and awe. This country has always gone forward, gone back, gone forward, gone back. I don't think, and quite frankly, I think that probably reflects progress for many of us in lots of ways, right? Progress is never, ever, ever a straight line. So I guess that's the first thing I would say. You know, in terms of doing this work with forgiveness and compassion, I truly believe, and I know that there are not many people who feel this way in this moment, and that's okay. But I truly believe that every person, most people, let me just say most people, I do believe that most people want the best for their children and this country. I do believe that. There is something in me, and it is the only way that I have been able to survive, is to believe in the goodness of people. Because I am telling you, if I did not believe that, I don't know that I could function. So, and I'm talking about just, you know, horrible things that have happened. I still believe in the goodness of people. I still believe that people are trying the best that they can with the information that they have, with the circumstances that they have, with the upbringing that they have had. And so I believe that if we try to think about that, it will change how we see those who we may not agree with on the surface.
What allows you to give people that grace, knowing that you have hurt or pain, or, people have caused, wrong or difficulty, however you want to put it, right? Like, I think that it's so important to start from that place of grace because it allows a path forward. And, specifically for our readers, I'm referencing a post that Jyarland made on Facebook about how to have difficult conversations and how to be effective in dialogue. And I do think this is an important place to start from. And so, how do you allow yourself that grace, and how do you get yourself, because I understand that you believe it, but you had to get there, right? And not just, or is it like a fake it till you make it for the rest of us?
No, how did I get there? So first of all, I'm not there all the time. Some days I'm just mad and I'm just pissed off, right?
That makes me feel so much better.
Yes. And I think that we have to all recognize that, listen, I think that we can all think about people who we respect, whether they are people from history and or religious prophets, etc. Doesn't matter. We can all see human elements in them in their effort to be a better version of themselves. So I think that's just normal. But how I got there is through deep introspection and thinking about the times when I've hurt people, because I have. And I also think about the ability to change, because I am not the same person today that I was even in terms of 10 years ago, even when I came into. So when I went to law school, that was really my introduction into the social justice and the racial justice space. And that was kind of like my awakening. I am not the same person when I came into this work then than I am today. I've evolved, I've changed. And so I just think that this idea that people are fixed in their thinking, I don't know that I believe that it's true. I don't know if I answered your question. So I got there through introspection and thinking about how I've made mistakes and how I've hurt people and the grace that I want someone else to extend me, and trying then to extend that to other people. I also am very intentional about having a diverse circle of friends. I'm very intentional about that. I don't do echo chambers very well, and I think they're dangerous. And so even now, for me, this notion that everyone who, fell in line with one particular side politically versus another, that all of these people are like the spawn of Satan and they are all racist, I think that's horrible. I don't think that's true. Deeply, I don't think that it's true. Because I know some of these people, because I've had conversations with some of these folks. And I don't know a better way to say it, to be honest with you.
So, Jyarland, so much of your work, right, is getting people to be able to see, recognize, and speak to that difference and come across conflicts, discomfort, to find resolution and common ground. And one of the things that, I'm worried about for my son and thinking about the future I want to build for him. And you said, I'm really intentional about having people of all different kinds of backgrounds and perspectives. Is, you mentioned in some of the things that I've read that you've written recently, but is about conceding ground, right? Conceding when your side makes a mistake. And I feel one of my fears right now is just how polarized and siloed we're getting, in part because of social media that just lets us see the world as we want to see it. And so that's one issue. And then the other issue that really concerns me, right, is about cancel culture. We talked about this on our last show. You know, it's something that I don't personally like because and it's my side, progressive side, the social justice side, sometimes using it. And I have trouble with it because it's also about disposability of human beings. And as someone that believes in social justice, I don't believe human beings are disposable. I believe all people are fallible and all people are redeemable. And so I'm, you know, talk to us about how to concede ground when you've made a mistake, when your side makes a mistake. And, you know, what are your thoughts about cancel culture and where it gets us closer to justice or equity, or if it gets us farther from it?
Yes. So you have to know that I am deeply concerned about cancel culture. I'm deeply concerned about it. I think it's a silencing tactic. And what worries me is if the person who I don't want to hear, if that person can be canceled, I know that I can be canceled as well. You know, there's this saying that if they come for you in the day, they're going to come for me at night. And what I mean by that is if I see other folks being canceled, I know it's just a matter of time before that same behavior is targeted at me. And so I have a problem with it. In terms of ceding ground, the only way that you can cede ground, Christina, is if you truly know your side and if you are objective, right? But most people do not have such a limited capacity for objectivity that is what inhibits us from being able to have dialogue outside of our spaces. For example, I recently said to a friend, we were talking about the election, of course, and we were talking about voters and, you know, some people voted, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And what I said was this, and what my friend said, who I deeply respect and I love, what my friend said was, well, you know, what's really disturbing to me is, you know, you've got almost 70 million people who voted on this side and they're all racist. And I said, well, why would you think that they're all racist? Like, when do you have a group where all people like think the exact same? Like, how does that happen? And he said, well, yeah, I guess you're right about that. And then he says, well, but most of them are racist. It's like, well, how do you know that? Well, I don't know. And so what I think happens, so how we cede ground is, number one, I try to ask people questions. Like, how do you know that? Like, well, is that like mathematically, like, do you think that's really makes sense? And so one of the ways I think we can cede ground is we can say, you know what? But there are people who have views that may not be welcoming to all of us on both sides. It's true. But so that's one way that we cede ground. We can also cede ground by truly knowing the policies of whatever side we support, have advocated, and knowing the pros and cons of those, and to say, yeah, I can see how that may have been harmful in this case.
We're all like writing notes and talking, like
it's true.
Anything, we're all like scrambling, like, oh my gosh, that was.
It's true.
But you know, speaking of that post, I guess I want to just say something else. This idea that there is something that we have in common with another person, if we're willing to look for it and spend the effort, is, to me, it's just so basic. It's what we teach our children. But for some reason in our adultness, we decided that just doesn't work for us and we don't have to do that anymore. So this notion, and I'm actually going to pull up that post because I'm trying to remember all the steps. Nuna, do you have all the steps that I had in that post? There we go.
We have it.
Oh, here's one of the things I said.
Yeah, and we're going to share it. So folks.
Oh, okay. Oh, I have to. So this notion that I don't have to agree with you. I don't have to agree with you to like you. I don't have to agree. And I'm going to tell you what I think really the root of all this is. I think the root of feeling like you have to agree with someone to like them comes from our insecurities. Really secure people don't feel like they need to, you need to buy in. So I guess, so that's something. This notion about being curious instead of being incredulous is, to me, one of the most profound things.
On that note, as I think about our audience, as we're heading into the holiday season here, what comes up for you as folks are going home and perhaps, sitting next to or across from folks that may not feel the same way and there's a lot of tension and strife? Like, what could you say to our audience members to try to move through that space with grace?
Yeah, so from my perspective, and this is going to sound so simplistic, Munab, and I feel like I'm not being helpful, but we are in the midst of a global pandemic. A global pandemic, meaning, like, for many, this is a matter of life or death. And I'm just not sure if this year of all years, we should be able to put aside some of the other stuff and just really relish in the fact, in who is there, because there was no guarantee that you would even see them again. We have over 200,000 people in this country who have died. So I guess, putting things in perspective is like really, really real. So I'm going to say something else. And now this is a little bit of my own kind of worldview. What I believe related to politics, people in power, and in this country, that means white people for the most part, people in power always make up. I have a great example. It's called the Civil War, where you literally had an entire country, brother against brother, fighting one another. Well, guess what they did? They made up. And so what do I mean when I say that? What I mean is people in power are going to make up, and they are going to figure out what their common interests are, even if they may have seemed on opposite sides. And it would be like something that I can't understand if those in power like make up, and those of us who really have no power, we're still mad. Like how does that help us in terms of our effort to hold folks accountable? I need people to help me hold people accountable who we've now elected into positions of power, but we can't do that if we've said, A, I'm just not going to talk to you anymore, or if we've written off half of the country. Because if you can write off half of the country, it's just a matter. So now you're down to 70 million. And that's not literally half of the country, but so now you're down to this small group. There's going to come a time when then you can actually have a conflict where you take that group and that group becomes even smaller. So before you know it, you're going to have you and like two people. What kind of movement is that?
Jyarland,
not one that's going to get it done.
I don't understand.
The first time I met you, I had the opportunity to hear you talk about the anatomy of an apology. And I remember just being enthralled. Granted, we're talking about a political situation here. I just felt like in so many topics on our podcast, things hit on a personal level in addition to a community level. And I thought about all the times that people had apologized wrong to me, and maybe I had apologized wrong, but we're not going to talk about that part. But, talk to us a little bit about why apologies are important in this process, and the fact that there's a right or wrong way to do that, because, well, yeah, I'll let you take it from there.
It is so interesting. So one of the things, actually, there are two things in particular that I believe make my approach to race, diversity, and inclusion different. I actually begin before I get into any conversations about how racism operates. Before I do that, we do two things. We, number one, discuss the anatomy of an apology. Number two, we work through and develop skills related to conflict resolution. The reason that I start with the anatomy of an apology is because we're all going to make mistakes. We're all going to mess up. There is no way that you can talk about anything of import and not make a mistake. But what happens is most of us do not know what to do or how to do, what to do when we make that mistake. And so as a result, so first, we don't go into it thinking, I might get something wrong, right? So there's a little level of arrogance that we all show up with. But if you start with this notion of, I better practice apologizing in advance because I'm going to get something wrong. So there's that. But the other thing is the reason, so then we get into these conversations, someone says something wrong, we don't know how to apologize, we end up doubling down. We end up doubling down on our ideas, on our beliefs, and making it worse. Or we give these kind of like horrible apologies, and they're called pseudo apologies. And so you end up saying something like, well, I'm sorry if you are offended. Well, that's not a real apology, right? Or I'm sorry if I made you feel that way. Or I'm sorry you think this. I'm sorry you think this. So those are just non-starters in terms of apologies. And if anyone has ever received an apology like that, they know that if anything, it makes you actually, hi.
Sorry, everyone that's listening. Santi just joined. Santi, can you say hi?
Hi.
Santi, how are you?
Say, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
No, you don't have to be sorry.
No, but Santi knows how to apologize. That's what I'm showing everybody. Okay.
Oh, that was fancy. See, I wasn't ready for that, Christina. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. I'm going to mute myself.
I'm sorry. So we know what can happen when an apology goes wrong. But what I did is I believe that there is a really powerful model apology, and I use this in my work, from Thich Nhat Hanh. And I don't think that that's the only way to apologize, but what I like about his model apology is that it does a couple of things. It, number one, acknowledges that another person is suffering. The other thing that it does is it acknowledges that I, as the person who has offended you, I have contributed to your suffering in some way. The other part of this model apology is this invitation calling this person in. And it says then, I want to understand more. I want to learn more about you. And I want to do this so that I can never make the same mistake again. And then there's this level of vulnerability. And that model apology then ends with saying, will you please help me? And I have to tell you, if you can imagine receiving an apology like that, that is so disarming, right? And if we could practice, however it sounds for us, and the reason that I use it as a model apology is because the idea is not that you need to memorize exactly what he said, but it's that you need to understand those components. It's powerful. And I will just say too, this work related to race, diversity, and inclusion, if it is not being done in a way that makes you a better person in other aspects of your life too, then I think it's being done wrong. That's where I am on it. And so when I am working with clients, I am overjoyed when I hear someone say, you know what, but I can actually use this in a conversation with my colleague where race isn't even an issue. Oh, I can use this with my partner. I can use this with my child. but that's what it's supposed to do. Because at the end of the day, I deeply believe the work of race, diversity, and inclusion, it's about making us be better people, period.
100%. Yes. There's nothing that anti-racism work doesn't touch, because the way that I have experienced it as a white woman in this world, it is like pulling sickness out of my body. And it makes me feel better. Like, it makes my body healthier, and it makes the way that I engage healthier. And I don't know that I will ever reach the bottom of it, just because of the circumstances of this country and our foundation and the part where we haven't properly apologized, properly repaired, done the work that we really need to do in this country to heal and transform. Arguably the biggest pain that we carry.
It is so important to keep in mind that when we have systems of oppression, however they may be, whether they are based on race, gender, religion, sexual identity, however they show up, those systems hurt the parties who are being impacted, and they also hurt the perpetrators as well, right? And so one of the things that I have said is it's critical for people to look at this work as, this is about making me better. This isn't about my pity for someone who is LGBTQAI, Black, Hispanic, queer, Muslim, differently abled. This is not about my pity for them. This is about helping me do the work that I need to do to become the very best version of myself.
Yes. And pulling toxins out of my body.
Right.
Yeah.
And if that isn't what Three Righteous Mamas is about, I don't know what is.
Well, the world that we want for our kids can't exist without doing this work. Like, this is foundation.
But do you all think, so I have to ask you the three of you a question. Do you think that the work like ends?
Never.
Do you think that there's a stopping point?
I mean, I think all knowledge and growth never ends, right? Like, that's part of life, and it's wisdom and beauty. I think we get afraid because we are culturally taught that we should have all the answers all the time. And we just got to get comfortable with it never ends, and that's okay. And it never ends for anybody.
Well, I think it's just because we're all on a journey. Everyone's train starts and stops at different places. And I think it's okay. Maybe at some point in your life, you step off because you're like, here's my pasture and I'm relaxing, right? And like, you pass the baton, you pass the, not a baton, but like the torch to someone else to continue the light, right? Because we also have to acknowledge that we do the work and we share the work. And because people are at different stages and different levels of enlightenment, it's not a straight line. And so I'm so thankful that you joined us today. When you were talking about Linda Brown earlier, I got shook, Jyarland. And then as you were telling us those stories about your son, I was furious. I was floored. I actually couldn't talk for a bit. I was in tears here. And so I can only imagine what you've carried. And more importantly, I'm so thankful that you took your light into that situation, not just for your son, but that we all get to benefit from the light you bring in because you're starting this civil rights firm. You've gone back to law school, right? You just passed a bar exam and you continue to not only learn, but share that knowledge. And I'm so thankful that I've gotten to learn from you and that we've been able to share a little bit about your journey and what you're bringing, to the table for all of our listeners. And so thank you, Bentley, for giving us Jyarland. We'll take her.
Thanks so much for joining us and sharing your story with us. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
You're amazing,
Thank
Jyarland.
you. I don't know about that, but thank you. Thank you. You all are amazing. Thank you for having this podcast. Thank you for inspiring your listeners, and I'm just happy to have been a part of it.
I will say I took probably 4 pages of notes in that conversation with Jyarland, and she has this this spirit of generosity. She's able to greet people that she disagrees with a spirit of generosity that I strive to in my daily life, but I have not been able to do it lately. I think that it's been hard for me because I have loved ones and family members who are Trump voters, and I could kind of like be okay with it the first time because we didn't know exactly what that meant. It's been really hard for me the second time to find a generous place with a Trump voter right now, just knowing that they are able to make peace with all of the strife that he created in families and in people. And I think that, she talks about it being an inside job, and that is certainly a place that I am looking to do some introspection and work as we head into Thanksgiving, although we will be spending Thanksgiving in our 4 walls. But thinking about like how to find a generous spirit there. I don't know. I'm not there right now.
I hear you, Martha, because I have these contradictory feelings. Like there's my organizing brain, which is very logical, that is like, one of the things that Jyarland has written about is like, you cannot shame people into agreeing with you, right?
Right, and I know that.
Yeah, and so I know that too, and of course, logically, in my best days of organizing, know that. That is not how you move human behavior. You may get some conformity, but you don't actually really move people inside of themselves. And you may not actually move behavior. You may just move someone to agree with you in person because they just don't want to have the conflict. But you haven't actually gotten them to think a different way or have a different perspective or see your point of view. So there's part of me that really wants to step back as a country, or, our side, right? Mm-hmm. And be like, how do we go organize? Because here in Texas, I shared with y'all the number that, here in Texas, 89% of African-American women voted for Biden, 75% of Latinas, and just 38% of white women. Oh. And it's also fascinating to me because the Latino population as a whole gets painted as the reason why Trump won Texas, but really that's not really how that happened. And so for me, I just want to go out and have conversations. Actually, I want to practice some of the things that I used to do when I was younger and try and move people, especially in this really hard moment. And I want to know if I can withstand it emotionally, because I think that's the other thing. It takes a toll on you. And so trying to remember that in the face of hard conversations that are hurtful, that you never forget your purpose, and that's what will carry you through to have those conversations. So that's for me what I'm taking away.
That's a good word.
Martha, I hear you. And the thing that's sitting with me is there's definitely conflict out there. There's a lot of work that I need to do that's internal. And it was so powerful for me to hear her generosity, because your intention and your attitude sets the tone for everything else that follows. And if we're starting from a place that's contentious and from a place of distrust and from a place of hurt, where do you go from there? And that's why I continue to be blown away by her starting a lot of her work with the anatomy of an apology and how to deal, some tools to deal with conflict. And she said that those components of an effective apology are truly disarming. And, I just looked up the definition of disarm, to deprive of means, reason, or disposition, to be hostile, to win over, to divest of arms, or to deprive of a means of attack or defense, and to make harmless. And none of us is perfect. Every single one of us is fallible. And what an amazing place to start from, knowing how to apologize and to remove any harm. And if that's where we start from, and that when we mess up, if we know how to invoke that to pick ourselves up again, if our goal is truly to come together, what a better way, what a better tool to add into our arsenal, right? I'm still yet to find any example of war that brought peace.
Okay.
And I think this tool is completely underutilized. And to me, it's wisdom and strength is something that mamas teach their babies from the get-go. And so I am affirmed again that mamas are the ones that are going to take us forward. And this is the kind of energy I want to be putting into the world. And I'm blown away by our conversation today. And I'm grateful to be doing this with both of you.
Likewise, big time. I have a challenge for us. Let's practice this week.
I mean, I feel like I need to be able to see more people.
You'll just have to apologize to Santi, Christina.
I'm gonna apologize to Santi. Okay. I'm gonna try and get in some more conflicts with the two people I see, and then see if I can thoroughly apologize.
All right. So just so everyone's clear on the challenge, there's 4 parts here. You have to acknowledge the suffering. You acknowledge that you contributed to that suffering. And there's a call to the person to say, like, hey, I want to learn more so I don't make this mistake again. Will you please help me? And so that's the spirit of all of the pieces of a complete apology. So game on.